Well, I was working in Iraq for a Saudi company in Baghdad, and the office I was in was attacked by a gang that took me hostage and another person in my office, and they held me for 311 days in a little house outside of Baghdad called Mahmudiyah. And toward the end, I was rescued by Army Special Forces and was able to come back to the Special Forces bases in Baghdad, and then flew back to the U.S. Well, yeah, when I was first kidnapped, I thought if I lived for a week, it'd be a miracle. But then, after I realized this gang wanted money, I started to realize they were going to keep me alive for a while to try to get the money. And I would just go day by day. I mean, when I was first kidnapped, I didn't know I was going to be held 311 days. And I would just try to get through one day at a time, one meal at a time, and at the end of the day, I'd say, okay, I got through today. I'll go to sleep. Hopefully I'll get through tomorrow. And then just think about things outside of that little cell I was in each day. So just day by day. You know, with the day you're kidnapped, that's like everything's in slow motion and you can't believe it's happening. And then the day I was rescued was the same way. It was like everything was in slow motion, and you can't believe after all these months and months that somebody's actually there to rescue you. And then, yes, before you couldn't make any decisions, and now you can do what you want. And to get back home and do the adjustment takes time. I mean, because just with me, just to go out to a grocery store and see people walking around doing normal things and kids running around, that was so unusual for what I had been through for the previous 10 and a half months, just to adjust to the freedom again, which sounds like an odd thing, but it takes time to adjust to that.
Right. So were there any situations that you found yourself in where you had these flashbacks, or, if you were in close, confined spaces?
Well, I didn't have flashbacks in a bad way. I mean, I would remember things. Like one day I was out in my front yard and my neighbor had purchased something at a hardware store, and he was cutting these zip ties off of these tools, and he has the zip ties laying in his front yard. And when I was being held, I had zip ties on my hands and feet almost 24 hours a day. So I'm looking down at his yard and watching him cut these zip ties, and I'm thinking, well, I've got a completely different relationship to that zip tie than he does. But it was just something I remembered, and from time to time things like that will come up. But I don't have nightmares about it or anything. It's just something that will remind me what had happened back then.
Right. And it's obviously something that you can't forget. That
Yeah.
you can't just block it out of your memory and act like it never happened. So coming back, like you said, you have 2 daughters, and you have this family. How was it trying to rebuild that relationship with family, friends, coworkers? How was that process?
Right. Well, when I first got back, people were afraid to say something to me because they were afraid they would say the wrong thing and I would get upset. My daughters were wanting to do everything for me, and don't get me wrong, I was very weak and I needed help doing some things, but after a while you try to get back into more of a normal relationship on dealing with people. But at first I would say something to other people about, if they say, well, where you been? And I would say, well, I was taken hostage in Iraq. And I stopped doing that, because as soon as you say something like that, people just clam up because they don't know what to say next, because they don't run into that. And so I got to where I didn't I didn't bring that up with people until I got to know them and talk to them a little bit. But it's adjustment for the family and the friends to get used to dealing with you till they figure out you're not so fragile.
So, is there anything you wish that had been handled differently in the situation with your reintegration process?
They offered to do anything for me, and I'm the one who said no, because I actually did think I was okay when I wasn't, and they knew better. So they let me go along on my own, and they had told me, it's going to take time and don't make any big decisions, and over time it would get better. They were right about that, I guess. I think that depends on the person who's been taken hostage, how they recover and how long it takes them to get over it.
Right, like there's no template for this, that everyone's going to react the same
Right.
way. What has been the best practice for you? Is there a coping mechanism that you used back then? Therapy, or people just sharing your story?
It's just, to me, it's just part of me now. It's like your arm or your leg. It's there, it'll always be there. And some people are curious and want to know things. Other people are afraid to ask and don't want you to talk about it. So it doesn't bother me to talk about it, but it just depends on the other person.
Right. So do you have any advice for a returning hostage on how to get back on your feet?
I think come a returning hostage, like in my case, I thought the first day everything was fine. Well, I can tell you it's not fine. And just take it slow. Know it's going to take a long time to recover and get back in the swing of normal life, and just be around your family and do normal things. Because when I was being held, that's what I missed. I didn't miss. I didn't think about a new car, a new TV, or a bigger stereo. I just thought about being with my family. So just being with your family and doing normal, everyday things. Over time, you'll adjust back, or I did anyway.